Golden autumn leaves lined the elegant Parisian boulevard, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow that belied the chill in the air. High-end boutiques and stately apartment buildings stood in stark contrast to the unexpected scene unfolding on the cobblestone sidewalk. They say that life has a way of bringing us face to face with our greatest mistakes when we least expect it. That in a world of countless intersections and missed connections, fate sometimes orchestrates the one meeting that can change everything. In this picturesque Parisian neighborhood, this is how our story begins with Jonathan Barrett, a 42-year-old CEO whose tailored blue suit and polished exterior concealed a heart that had been running from the past for exactly 8 years. Little did he know that on this ordinary autumn day, 3 identical faces would stop him in his tracks and force him to confront the family he never knew existed. Some truths can no longer remain hidden when they stand right before your eyes, asking for help. Jonathan Barrett, 42 years old, was the founder and CEO of Barrett Global Innovations, headquartered in Paris with offices in 12 countries. His appearance was that of success personified, a perfectly tailored blue suit, designer watch, and the confident demeanor of someone who closed multi-million-dollar deals over breakfast. Yet beneath this polished exterior, a profound emptiness had taken residence in his eyes, a vacant quality that his executive team had learned to navigate but never mention. 15 years earlier, Jonathan had been an ambitious young entrepreneur with nothing but innovative ideas and his American college sweetheart, Caroline, supporting his dreams. They'd moved to Paris for what was supposed to be a 6-month project, living in a tiny apartment in Montmartre, where Caroline taught English to supplement their income while Jonathan pitched his software concepts to potential investors. When his first major contract was signed, they celebrated with champagne under the Eiffel Tower, planning a life where success would be shared equally. But as Barrett Global Innovations expanded at an astonishing rate, Jonathan's world narrowed to boardrooms and balance sheets. Caroline's pleas for work-life balance fell on increasingly distant ears. Their arguments intensified, particularly around starting a family, a dream Caroline held dear, while Jonathan insisted they wait for the right time that somehow never arrived. Now Jonathan's daily routine was a carefully orchestrated schedule of international video conferences, investor meetings, and solitary evenings in his penthouse overlooking the Seine. His personal assistant anticipated his needs before he expressed them, and the warm personality that had once charmed Caroline had been replaced by an efficient, often cold, executive persona. Exactly 8 years ago, Caroline had left him, boarding a plane back to America with divorce papers left on his desk. Jonathan had been in Tokyo closing their Asian expansion deal, unreachable for 3 critical days. By the time he returned to Paris and saw her letter, she had already gone, writing that she couldn't continue being married to someone who had chosen ambition over love and who refused to build the family she so desperately wanted. In quiet moments, Jonathan still carried her photograph, the last happy moment they'd shared in Provence, lavender fields stretching behind them, Caroline's smile genuine in a way it hadn't been in the months that followed. The photograph was the only personal item in his otherwise minimalist office. Despite his professional reputation for ruthless business acumen, Jonathan had established the Barrett Foundation, funding children's education initiatives and family support services across Europe. He never spoke publicly about these philanthropic efforts, as if the charity was a private attempt to balance some unseen moral ledger. As autumn painted Paris in hues of gold and amber, Jonathan found himself walking through an upscale neighborhood after a tense board meeting, seeking fresh air rather than the usual chauffeured car. The uncharacteristic decision to walk would become the pivoting point around which his entire life would soon revolve. It was on this crisp autumn afternoon that everything changed. The tree-lined avenue was postcard perfect, golden leaves carpeting the cobblestone sidewalks, elegant Haussmannian buildings rising on either side. Jonathan had been walking for nearly 20 minutes, his mind still processing the acquisition proposal his board had just rejected when he noticed them. 3 small figures stood together on the sidewalk ahead, their bright hooded sweatshirts, red, green, and yellow, creating a striking visual against the subdued autumn backdrop. Jonathan would have continued past, assuming they were local children playing, but something about their stillness made him slow his pace. As he drew closer, he saw they were young girls, appearing to be exactly the same age, around 7 or 8. Their identical faces peeked out from under their colorful hoods, and the youngest-looking one in the yellow sweatshirt held a cardboard sign with "Please help us" written in careful block letters. What stopped Jonathan cold wasn't just their apparent need, it was their faces, heart-shaped with high cheekbones, delicate noses, and wide-set eyes that were hauntingly familiar. Though they were clearly sisters, identical triplets in fact, it wasn't familial resemblance that made his breath catch. They looked exactly like Caroline. The same distinctive features he'd memorized over years of loving her were reflected in these 3 small faces, down to the slight furrow between their brows that appeared when they were concerned, exactly as Caroline's had done countless times during their final months together. Instinctively, Jonathan knelt down to their level, his mind racing with impossible calculations. The girls appeared to be about 7 years old. His separation from Caroline had been exactly 8 years ago. The timing aligned with a pregnancy Caroline might have discovered just as their marriage collapsed. "Hello there," he said gently in French, then switched to English when he noticed their uncertain expressions. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" "Our mom is at the hospital," said the girl in the red hoodie, her English perfect but with the slight accent of someone raised in France. "She told us to wait here until she comes back." "She's been gone since morning," added the one in green. Caroline's eyes filled with worry. "We're getting cold." Jonathan noticed their sweatshirts were stained and their jeans worn at the knees. The similarity to Caroline was so striking that he found himself searching their faces for any hint of himself. A dangerous, presumptuous thought he tried to dismiss. "What's your mother's name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. The triplets exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that reminded Jonathan of Caroline's expressive eyes, how she could convey entire thoughts without speaking. "Caroline," said the girl in yellow, still clutching the cardboard sign. "Caroline Barrett." The world seemed to tilt beneath Jonathan. Barrett, not her maiden name, which she had every right to reclaim after their divorce. Barrett. "And your father?" he managed to ask, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Another silent exchange between the girls before the one in red straightened her shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of Caroline gathering her courage that Jonathan nearly gasped. "We don't have a father," she said firmly. "Mom says he was too important and busy to have a family. He runs a big company." Jonathan felt as though he'd been struck. Each word matched the accusations in Caroline's final letter, words he'd dismissed as emotional exaggeration at the time, too absorbed in his company's expansion to recognize the truth in them. The girl in green coughed, a concerning, deep sound that immediately drew Jonathan's attention. He noticed then that all 3 girls looked pale, with shadows under their eyes suggesting more than just a day's fatigue. "How long has your sister been coughing like that?" he asked. "We're triplets, not sisters," corrected the girl in yellow with a hint of pride. "And Emma's been sick for 3 days. That's why Mom went to get medicine, but she said the pharmacy was far away." Jonathan made a decision in that moment, reaching slowly for his phone. "I'd like to help you find your mother and make sure your sister, your triplet, gets medicine for that cough. Would that be all right?" The girls hesitated, and Jonathan recognized the wariness in their expressions, a cautiousness that no 7-year-old should have to develop. "My name is Jonathan," he said softly, not adding his surname yet. "I think I might know your mother from a long time ago." Something in his tone must have conveyed sincerity, because the girl in red, who seemed to be the unofficial leader, gave a small nod. As she reached to take his cautiously offered hand, Jonathan noticed a small birthmark on her wrist, identical to one Caroline had in the same spot. In that moment, surrounded by falling golden leaves and faced with 3 perfect reflections of the woman he had lost, Jonathan understood that his life would never be the same again. 2 hours later, Jonathan sat in a private room at the American Hospital of Paris, his world utterly transformed. The triplets, Emma, Grace, and Lily, had been examined by the hospital's pediatric staff. Emma, in the green hoodie, had been diagnosed with bronchitis requiring immediate treatment. Jonathan had provided his insurance information and authorized comprehensive care, his name opening doors and eliminating questions. His mind raced with the confirmation he'd received. These were unquestionably his daughters. Caroline had listed him as the father on their birth certificates, a fact the hospital administrator had verified when checking their records. Born exactly 7.5 months after Caroline had left Paris, the timing aligned perfectly with the final weeks of their marriage. But where was Caroline now? The girls insisted she had gone to find medication for Emma early that morning, but hadn't returned. Jonathan had discreetly contacted his security team to begin searching, a knot of dread forming in his stomach as the hours passed with no sign of her. When the hospital room door finally opened, Jonathan stood immediately, prepared for Caroline's anger or accusations. Instead, a solemn-faced doctor entered, accompanied by a police officer. "Monsieur Barrett," the doctor began carefully, "we've received some difficult news about Madame Barrett." The officer stepped forward. "There was an accident this morning. A pedestrian was struck by a delivery truck near Pharmacie Saint-Germain. She had no identification, but the pharmacy staff recognized her description from her visit earlier, where she had asked about medication for a child with bronchitis." Jonathan felt the blood drain from his face. She is alive," the officer assured quickly, "but in critical condition in the intensive care unit. She has suffered head trauma and has not regained consciousness. It appears she was rushing back across a busy street after purchasing medication." In the officer's hand was a small pharmacy bag containing children's antibiotics and cough syrup. The image of Caroline rushing to help their sick child, only to be struck down in her urgency, made Jonathan's knees weaken. Where has she been living? The girls mentioned waiting near their home, Jonathan asked, trying to process this cascade of revelations. The officer consulted his notes. They have been residing in a small apartment in the 18th arrondissement. The building manager confirmed they moved in 6 months ago after relocating from Lyon. Before that, they lived in several cities across France. Jonathan struggled to make sense of this information, but why would Caroline be living in such reduced circumstances? Why move constantly? The doctor hesitated before responding. "Monsieur Barrett, we found medication in Madame Barrett's possession that indicates she has been undergoing cancer treatment. The girls confirmed their mother has been sick for some time and has had multiple hospital stays." The revelation struck Jonathan like physical pain. Caroline had been battling cancer while raising their daughters alone, moving from city to city, perhaps following treatment options, perhaps struggling to maintain stability as her health and finances deteriorated. "When can I see her?" Jonathan asked. "She is in surgery now. The next 24 hours will be critical," the doctor explained. "In the meantime, the children need care. As their father, you are their legal guardian in their mother's incapacitation." Jonathan looked through the room's window to where the triplets sat together in the children's waiting area, their bright hoodies now replaced with hospital-provided clothing while their own was being washed. They sat close together, a unit unto themselves, occasionally whispering to each other with worried expressions. "They don't even know who I am," Jonathan said quietly. The police officer's expression softened slightly. Perhaps it is time they did. When Jonathan approached the girls, they looked up with Caroline's eyes, expectant, worried, but with an inherent trust that children should be able to place in adults. "Have you found our mum?" Lily, the one who had worn the yellow hoodie, asked immediately. Jonathan knelt before them, bringing himself to their level. "Your mother has been hurt in an accident," he began gently, watching their expressions shift to fear. "The doctors are helping her right now and she's very strong, but it means you'll need someone to take care of you while she gets better." "We can take care of ourselves," Emma insisted, though her pale face and occasional cough undermined her brave statement. "I know you can. You're very brave," Jonathan acknowledged, "but I want to help." He took a deep breath. "There's something important I need to tell you. Something about your mother and me." Grace, the previously quiet triplet who had worn the red hoodie, studied his face intently. "You're him, aren't you?" she asked suddenly. "From the picture Mom keeps. She said you were too busy for us." Jonathan felt tears threatening at the edges of his vision. "I'm your father," he confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "But I didn't know about you. I never knew your mother was going to have you when she left. If I had known..." He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. 8 years of absence compressed into a single, impossible moment as 3 identical pairs of eyes, Caroline's eyes, assessed him with a mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and caution. "If you're our dad," Lily asked in a small voice, "why didn't you come find us before?" The simplicity of the question contained all the complexity of his failure. In that moment, Jonathan understood that his greatest challenge and his greatest opportunity were one and the same. "I didn't come find you before because I didn't know you existed," Jonathan explained gently as they sat in his penthouse apartment later that evening. "But that's not an excuse. I should have tried harder to find your mother after she left. I should have listened when she tried to tell me what was important." The triplets sat together on his pristine white sofa, looking both fascinated and out of place amid the minimalist luxury of his home. Their small backpacks, containing all their worldly possessions, sat by the door, a stark reminder of how differently they had been living. "Is Mom going to die?" Emma asked bluntly, the question hanging in the air like a physical presence. Jonathan moved from his chair to kneel before them. "The doctors are doing everything they can. Your mother is very strong. She's raised 3 amazing daughters all by herself. That takes incredible strength." "She's been really tired lately," Grace offered. "She said that's why we had to move to Paris, because there were better doctors here. And she cries sometimes when she thinks we're asleep," Lily added quietly. Jonathan felt each revelation like a physical blow. Caroline had been facing a life-threatening illness while raising their children alone. Children he hadn't known existed. "Your mother and I loved each other very much once," Jonathan told them, deciding that complete honesty was the only path forward. "But I made work more important than family, and that was a terrible mistake. I thought success meant building a big company, but I was wrong." "Mom says your company helps people talk to each other all over the world," Emma said, surprising him with her knowledge. Jonathan nodded. "Yes, that's what we do. We build communication systems." "But you couldn't talk to Mom," Grace observed, with the devastating simplicity of a child. "No," Jonathan acknowledged. "I couldn't, or wouldn't, and that's something I'll always regret." His phone rang. The hospital. Jonathan answered immediately, listening intently before thanking the caller and ending the connection. "Your mother is out of surgery," he told the girls, relief evident in his voice. "She's stable but still unconscious. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "Can we see her?" the triplets asked almost in unison. "Tomorrow morning," Jonathan promised. "For now, you need rest and food. Emma needs to take her medicine, and all of you need a good night's sleep." As he helped them settle into his guest rooms that had never before heard children's voices, Jonathan was struck by how natural it felt to care for them, despite the surreal circumstances. Each girl revealed different aspects of both Caroline and himself. Emma's analytical mind that questioned everything, Grace's quiet observance and unexpected insights, Lily's expressive emotions and quick attachment. Later that night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Jonathan sat at his desk reviewing the information his private investigator had already uncovered. Caroline had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of lymphoma 3 years ago. She had exhausted her savings on treatments while continuing to work as much as possible as a translator and English teacher. They had moved 5 times in the past 3 years, each move seemingly dictated by treatment options or financial necessity. And yet, according to the girls' school records, they had never missed significant education. Despite everything, Caroline had maintained their stability and development, something Jonathan wasn't sure he could have done in her position. His assistant entered with the items he'd requested, 3 identical stuffed animals for the girls to find when they woke, and information on the top oncologists in Europe specializing in Caroline's specific cancer. "Sir," his assistant said hesitantly, "the board is expecting you at tomorrow's merger meeting in London. Your flight is scheduled for 7 a.m. Jonathan looked up from the medical reports, suddenly aware of a decision that had already crystallized within him. Cancel it. Cancel everything for the next 2 weeks. And contact legal. I need to make some significant changes to my will and the company structure." His assistant's carefully neutral expression couldn't quite hide her shock. In 15 years, Jonathan Barrett had never cancelled a board meeting. "The merger," she began. "Can wait," Jonathan finished firmly. "Some things can't." 8 months later, Jonathan stood in the garden of his new home in the south of France, watching as the triplets raced across the lavender fields that stretched toward the horizon. The transformation of his life was evident everywhere, from the children's artwork covering the refrigerator to the family calendar tracking doctor appointments, school events, and ballet lessons. His home office, once dominated by multiple screens tracking global markets, now featured a corner desk where the girls often drew pictures while he handled the reduced workload he still maintained as chairman rather than CEO of Barrett Global. From the terrace, Caroline watched the scene with a soft smile. Her hair had grown back slightly after her last round of treatment, short but framing her face in a way that emphasized her remarkable bone structure. The latest scans had shown significant improvement, not a complete remission yet, but cause for genuine hope. "They've adjusted so well," she remarked as Jonathan joined her, handing her the herbal tea her doctors recommended. "Sometimes I wonder if children are more adaptable than we give them credit for." "They take after their mother," Jonathan replied, still marveling at the second chance he'd been given. Their relationship had transformed over these months, not returning to what it had been, but evolving into something new. Caroline had been understandably guarded when she first regained consciousness to find Jonathan at her bedside, the triplets excitedly telling her that they'd found their father. "I never meant to keep them from you," she had explained once they could speak privately. "I tried to reach you when I found out I was pregnant, but you were unreachable during that acquisition. By the time the divorce was finalized, I was angry and hurt. Then years passed and it seemed impossible to bridge that gap." Her eyes had filled with tears. "When I got sick, I thought about contacting you so many times, but I was afraid you'd see it as manipulation, or worse, that you wouldn't want them." "I've missed 8 years of their lives," Jonathan had responded. "I don't want to miss another day." Now, as the girls picked lavender to make the sachets Caroline had taught them to create, Jonathan reflected on how profoundly his priorities had shifted. Barrett Global still thrived under the leadership team he'd elevated, but he now worked remotely, primarily focusing on strategy while maintaining a schedule that prioritized family dinners and weekends free of business obligations. "Daddy, look," Lily called, running toward him with a butterfly perched on her finger. At 8 years old, she still showed the most open affection of the triplets, while Emma remained the most analytical and Grace the most observant. Jonathan knelt to examine her discovery, sharing her delight when the butterfly lingered before finally fluttering away. "Beautiful," he said, though he was looking at his daughter's face rather than the insect. Later that evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Jonathan and Caroline sat on the terrace under the stars, the scent of lavender carried on the gentle breeze. "I received an offer today," Caroline said after a comfortable silence. "A publishing house wants me to translate a series of children's books. I could work from home, set my own schedule around treatments." Jonathan recognized the significance of this, her first step toward reclaiming her professional identity since her diagnosis. "That sounds perfect," he said sincerely. "I've been thinking," Caroline continued, her voice taking on a careful quality that made him pay closer attention, "about our living arrangement." For these 8 months, they had maintained separate bedrooms in the large farmhouse. Co-parents focused on the girls' well-being and Caroline's health rather than any romantic reconciliation. "The girls asked me last week why you and I don't share a room like their friends' parents," Caroline said with a slight smile. "I didn't know how to answer." Jonathan felt his heart quicken, but kept his voice steady. "What would you like to tell them?" Caroline turned to face him fully. "I thought I could never trust you again after how things ended. But watching you these past months, how you've prioritized the girls, how you've supported my treatment without taking over, how you've rebuilt your entire life around family." She paused. "You're not the man who let me walk away 8 years ago." "No," Jonathan agreed quietly. "I'm not." That man didn't understand what really mattered. Caroline reached for his hand, her touch still sending the same electricity through him that it had when they first met. "I'm not saying we should rush anything. We're different people now. But perhaps we could explore what might be possible. For us, not just for the girls." Jonathan entwined his fingers with hers, feeling more complete than he had in 8 years. "I'd like that very much." From inside the house came a small sound, the creak of a floorboard. Jonathan and Caroline turned to find all 3 triplets watching from the doorway, identical expressions of hope and approval on their faces. "Sorry," Emma said, not sounding sorry at all. "We couldn't sleep. And we wanted to make sure you were doing this right," Grace added matter-of-factly. "Doing what right?" Jonathan asked, amused. Lily beamed. "Becoming a real family." Caroline laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as her health improved. "Come here, you little matchmakers." As all 3 girls rushed forward for a family embrace, Jonathan held them close, marveling at how the universe had conspired to give him a second chance through 3 identical faces that had stopped him on a Parisian street. Sometimes life's most meaningful connections are found in unexpected places, on autumn streets lined with golden leaves, in the identical faces of children we didn't know existed, in the courage of a woman fighting both illness and abandonment. For Jonathan and Caroline Barrett, a chance encounter became the catalyst for healing wounds that had festered for 8 years, proving that genuine transformation is possible when we finally see what truly matters. Their journey reminds us that family can be lost and found, broken and mended, distant and reunited, that sometimes the wealthiest among us are actually the poorest until they discover the true treasures waiting to be claimed. Perhaps today, as you walk your own path, you might pass someone whose life is intertwined with yours in ways you cannot yet imagine. Someone holding a sign, literal or figurative, asking for the help that could transform both their world and yours. Will you stop and look closely enough to see?